Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a non-spoiler book review for Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I know that these books are super popular, so a lot of people are already very aware of the basic information about this story. It's a heist story, follows a group of 6 individuals, hence Six of Crows, and they're kind of criminals. They're not the best of characters, they're very morally gray, but you get to know a lot about them as they are trying to pull off this intense heist. Our main 6 characters do make their debut really in this story, but you'll still hear people say that you should probably read the original Grisha trilogy first, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that the events of that original trilogy do take place before the events of this story, so there are some references to things from that Grisha trilogy that you might be spoiled for, and then on top of that, the magic in the Grisha trilogy is delved into a lot more than it is in this. In this, it's almost as if you know what the magic system is like. I think for those reasons, it does make a lot of sense to read the original Grisha trilogy first. However, if you are not the kind of reader that has to know every single thing about the magic system and you kind of care more about the relationships between the characters themselves, their pasts, and the events that they're currently involved in, if you care about those things, that's really the focus of this story, so you can get by reading this one without knowing everything there is to know about the magic. But if you are the kind of reader that really wants to know all those bits of information, you probably do either want to read Grisha trilogy first or just look up how the Grisha magic system works, and then you'll enjoy this one more. Now that all of that stuff is out of the way, I do really believe that the story, its main focus is the characters and their relationship and their pasts. I do think that that is the thing that Bardugo wanted to dive into the most with this story. When I heard about it the first time I picked this up a couple years ago, I went into it with completely different expectations. When you hear heist story, you think, well, at least I think, fast-paced, high stakes, edge of your seat. Those are the kinds of things that come to mind. And when I picked this up the first time, discovered that that really wasn't what this was. Just to clarify, there are very high stakes. If our characters don't succeed in their current mission, they're probably going to wind up dead or imprisoned for the rest of their life. So the stakes are very high. I just don't feel that that's actually what's propelling the plot forward and what makes people love this book so much. To me, I think that Leigh Bardugo's character work is why people really love this so much. And the character work is delivered in an interesting way. So a lot of times you will hear, anytime you research the craft of writing, you will almost always see the recommendation to avoid flashback sequences because a lot of times authors end up not knowing how to organically let you know about the character through the narrative, through events that happen in present day, through dialogue. They don't know how to do that organically. They also really want you to care about their character because they know their tragic backstory, so they want you to know it. And it just kind of ends up being put in there without it really feeling like it makes sense to the story. Despite this, there are still a lot of authors that try to utilize flashbacks in their stories. And if you are the kind of reader that no matter what, you hate flashbacks, you might not love this story because it definitely is woven into the narrative. But I think that the way in which Leigh Bardugo chose to go about it, I really enjoyed. It didn't quite feel like an interruption to what was happening in present day. I do think that it made for a slower beginning because when things start to get intense later on in the book, when the heist really starts to pick up, I think that at that point you are familiar with the characters, you do know a lot about them, and that's when things really pick up and the pace gets crazy. But initially, when you're first reading it, you're kind of finding out about these characters and you find out this awesome heist and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be awesome. But then it takes a while to get there because they're on their way there and then you're learning about their pasts. And if you are into this story for the heist, it's just going to take a bit before you get to the actual heist. Reading this the second time around, I really enjoyed the slower beginning. I enjoyed getting to know about our characters because I also knew that the payoff was going to be worth it and that these flashbacks weren't going to interrupt the intense, awesome, high-stakes stuff. So because I went into it knowing, okay, I want to know about why Kazbrecker is the way he is. Why does he wear his gloves? Why does he seem to get all weird when people want to get around close to him? Why is he all uptight? And then why is Inej so mysterious and quiet? And you want to know about these characters, and then you get to know about these characters, and then you get to the really cool stuff. I also found that Leigh Bardugo's portrayal of gray morality was done really well, and almost better than I've found it done in a lot of adult fantasy. And that's not to say adult fantasy does it better all the time, and it's not that because it's adult it will automatically be better than young adult. I don't mean anything like that. It's just normally, because I enjoy both age ranges, I find that the darker sides of humanity tend to get explored more in adult fantasy than in young adult, and therefore the kinds of gray morality characters that a lot of us are drawn to are in these older audience intended books. But in this one, I actually felt that while reading it, I felt like I was seeing exactly why some people turn out the way they do. I just felt like the execution of that was done really, really well. The only thing that was maybe not my personal favorite was that once we get to the present day, in my brain, I imagined the characters older. They were 17-ish, all of them, and I was just telling myself, okay, they're 22. Because I think because I'm so used to gray morality type characters being a little bit older, and maybe the teacher in me just doesn't like imagining a 17-year-old having to become this crime boss, or maybe I just am not used to seeing 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds that are that intense. I know that's a complaint for some people about young adult. It's like, I don't feel like young people are capable of all these things, which I think it has some merit, but at the same time, I feel like that complaint is a tad bit silly because the intended audience is younger, and young people don't think they're incapable, and also they're not incapable. But when you get older, the older you get, it's almost like you never really feel like you're a grown-up. So then when you look at people even younger than you, you think, oh, you just don't even know what it's like. And I'm not even really that grown-up. So you kind of just continuously think that young people are even younger. That's how I am anyway. Maybe that's just my own personal issue. But I would just tell myself. That's all I had to do. I was just like, okay, Kaz in my brain is 23, 24, 22, whatever. And then I was good with everything. I also found occasionally that the dialogue was really well done and that the conversations between the characters felt very real. And then other times it almost felt a little too jokey. It just seemed like a lot of the characters relied on not being very serious in dialogue. So there was one character that was always being a jokester. There's another character who's like kind of flirty and sassy. And then Kaz is a character that I feel like is just intense all the time, except for sometimes when the one guy was being jokey, then the intense Kaz would also then be jokey, and that was a little strange for me because it just didn't feel like it fit with him. So there was the occasional little hiccup for me in the dialogue that just didn't quite feel like it matched the characters, or it felt a little on the nose, a little much, but certainly not throughout the entire book, and not enough to where if I rated books, I wouldn't be like, this is going down an entire star. It's not anything like that. It's just my take on the dialogue. Lastly, I want to touch on diversity in the story. And I know that that's a word that has weirdly become controversial, even though I personally feel that you shouldn't love a book just because there's diversity in it. But if the diversity in it is done in a way that you enjoyed or that you thought was a good representation of said diversity, then it should be mentioned. And in this particular book, I do think that the diversity was done really well. You have characters that look different from one another. You have characters that are struggling with mental health. You have characters that are different sexual orientations. You have different body sizes. So you just have a mix of things, and it never felt like the author was just shoving it in my face to be like, I hit all the check boxes. It didn't feel like that. And it just felt like a story. And it made sense because of the way that their world is set up, that these people came from here, and so they have different features. They're going to look like this. It made sense to the story. I just thought she did a good job with it, and when an author does a good job with diversity, I think it's worth mentioning. Anyway, that's it for my review of Six of Crows. I do think that if you like good character work, and you like morally gray characters, and you don't mind a slow beginning and then a good payoff at the end, I think you'll really enjoy this. But if you're somebody who hates flashback sequences and you just don't care that much about taking the time to get to know the characters, you just want to get to the action, you might get bored with this book. I personally really enjoyed it. I am glad that I gave it another go because I really liked it. I really liked it, guys. I'm excited to read the next one now. Let me know your thoughts on this story. Don't spoil anything for the next one. I'm really excited to read it. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.